again for Inside Gateway, a weekly live look behind the curtain. Today's guest is Mark Maibach.
Hi, John.
Thanks for joining us today, Mark. It is Admin Professional Month or something like that, so we're trying to celebrate some admin staff, and Mark is our
Chief Financial Officer.
Or CFO. So, okay, Mark, explain a little bit what you do.
Well, basically my job is to take care of the money that comes into Gateway and the money that goes out of Gateway, and then as far as payroll and benefits and stuff on the human resources side. So
Okay.
both the money side and the human resources side.
So, I see your signature on my paycheck, so
Yep. Yeah, everybody loves me one day a month, John.
there you go. All right. So let's rewind a little bit. What was your, what were you doing before you came to Gateway Woods?
Well, we had, I got a degree in accounting a million years ago and spent quite a few years in our family's furniture store, and then left that, and my family was in Georgia for 3 years. I was a controller of a small tire parts company down there, and we really enjoyed being down there, but God said, come back where it snows. So a little over 8 years ago, we moved back up to north of the Mason-Dixon line here in Leo, Indiana. So it's always been numbers, but yeah, different venues.
Okay, so this is obviously more of a nonprofit environment. The furniture was for-profit and for-profit in Georgia as well?
Yes, correct.
So explain the difference maybe from the outside, but then also the inside for you, your day-to-day, how it differs.
Well, it doesn't differ a lot. There's always, there's debits and credits, regardless of how you do accounting. For-profit and not-for-profit is more of a tax designation than it is an operational designation. Hopefully, Gateway brings in more money than we send out, so that would make us profitable from a financial sense. But the fact that the profits go back into the mission rather than into the pockets of the owners is the difference in what not-for-profit versus a for-profit company is.
Okay, very good. So, did you have much experience with Gateway Woods before you were called to come here? Or?
Boy, I really didn't, John. With the fact that my family worked retail, we didn't do a lot of out-of-state traveling because we worked weekends and stuff like that. Honestly, the first time I stepped foot on campus, I was an employee. I actually even interviewed off campus. So
oh, wow.
It was kind of crazy to think, but yeah, I was an employee before I ever got here.
So, how did Gateway even come to your lap then, or what was the need, or how did you even hear about it?
Well, as I was working for that company in Georgia, the economy took its toll, and I was in the process of working with the owner to shut it down orderly so that he didn't end up with a lot of headaches after he had to close his doors. And I was actually looking up to set up a CFO for hire kind of business, just work with a lot of little companies. And in the middle of all that, a pulpit letter came across the pulpit in Atlanta, and yeah, it was a bit of a stretch for me because I thought I went to Georgia to die, but the more Julie and I explored it and prayed about it, it was very obvious this is what God wanted us to do. So yeah, we heard that announcement and called in and asked about it, and this is what I love to do. So being able to do it for a bigger purpose than me is pretty outstanding.
Very good. So moving from Ohio to Georgia, now Indiana, it's kind of a nice triangle there. So how is your family involved in that move? Was it hard for them? Because that's a lot of moving. What is that, 8 years time frame, or?
We were down there 3, and then we've been here 8. So yeah, moving those 2 big of a moves inside of 5 years, it was hard, but it was good. We absolutely love being part of the small church community down in Georgia, but it's limited as to the number of friends and people that you can know. And coming back up here where each of the kids have multiple people their age and their gender, and that's been very healthy. We love being part of the Gateway family and also the Leo Church family. So it's been a good move for our family. 3 of our 4 children have been baptized here, and the 4th one hopefully this fall.
All right.
So we praise God for that.
Very good. So what are some of the exciting things about crunching the numbers here at Gateway Woods?
Well, one of the things that I always loved about math is the fact that there's always one right answer.
Yeah.
When you get down to the bottom. And what I get to do every day, and for those of you who wonder, spreadsheets are people too. They just are not quite as sassy as some of the other people we deal with. But at the end of the day, the debits have to equal the credits. And one of the things that I love is you can tie a bow on it. When you get done with your financials, everything has to balance out. You have to tie it back. And that to me, you write a paper, you're never sure if the professor's going to like it. You do a math problem right, you get the points. So that's what I really love about what I do. When it comes right down to it, if your numbers aren't right, you can go find the reason. Yeah. And that's always appealed to me from little up to be able to make sure that all the numbers in the columns line up.
So you're a problem solver by nature then.
Problem solver by nature. Yeah, I would say that.
We have a question.
Yes.
Emily chimed in, and she wants to know who your favorite employee is.
I'm going to plead the fifth on that one.
Nice.
But my favorite employee on the Gateway campus is Julie Maibach. She works down in the LARC department, so I'll go on to that.
Nice. Yeah, if there's any other questions from the field, please chime in. All right, so I think we covered up a lot of things, but so your favorite thing is the numbers reconcile, or if they don't, you could figure that out. So what are some of the least favorite aspects, or when you wake up in the morning, you're like, man, I don't know.
Well, probably my two least favorite things, always with any type of job like this, you basically end up trying to fit 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag, and you got to figure out what can fall off the desk, what can't fall off the desk. Who am I going to upset today? That's a hard thing for me, being a people pleaser by nature. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's tough, and also it's hard to see when numbers don't come up to projection, and then you try and figure out why and what we can do to compensate for that, and it's always that's always a bit of a struggle, but it's also on the flip side of that, it's been amazing God's faithfulness. I remember even back when I was here working, Julie and the kids were packing up in Georgia before they moved up. Jeff Schumacher, who was the administrator at that time, gave me a bunch of old board reports to read when I was sitting at the airport waiting for airplanes. And just problems arises, solved by God. Problem arises, solved by God. Problem arises, solved by God. And then over the 8 years that I've been here, that's been pretty fascinating. So, census is maybe down a little bit, but then donations are up to make up the difference. Yeah. And there's a lot to be thankful for that. You have a bit of a conflict with somebody at the state level, and then all of a sudden they either get promoted or decide to go somewhere else, and the next person that comes in is a lot more understanding of what it is we're trying to do here. And so when I see all of those things, it breaks my heart to see when, I really wish that we had house parents, couples lining up to say, hey, we want to come work here, and for the assistant house parents that we need. I would love to see that, because we're here to provide help and healing to hurting children and families, and if we don't have the staff to do that, that's probably the hardest thing about my job. On the HR side, I don't necessarily have to hire them all, but I get to look at the openings in the org chart when people are not here.
Yeah. So, shameless plug. We do need house parents and assistants. So, if you're willing to pray for that position or talk to family and friends, we're willing to hear your prayers be answered and be a part of that. So, but yeah, no, it's great when you have this machine of Gateway Woods and God is the pilot of this machine, and there's lots of moving parts, and when some of those parts aren't there, the machine doesn't work as effectively.
Yeah, right. It doesn't. And essentially, just like the church, we're a body here. Mm-hmm. So if all of a sudden you're missing a hand or an ankle or something like that, it gets pretty sloppy.
Yeah, you can't run very fast without an ankle. So,
John, I can't run very fast with both ankles.
Yeah. Okay, so speak to your family again, like your kids. They've grown up in this community, and you feel it's been very positive for them being a part of something that's supported them. So the 8 years that you've been here, have they ever kind of like, man, I wish we wouldn't have moved here, or has it always been positive? Or
Well, I would say it has been positive. Human relationships are not without challenges,
yeah,
but I really don't think there is a time for anyone in my family but me that anybody said, I wish I hadn't moved here. And for me, the only time that happens is when there's snow on the ground,
yeah,
you know, and it's cold. I'm not a fan of that, but you know what? There's a lot of good reasons to be here, and snow's not that big of an issue. You just scrape it off your truck and go.
yeah. Very good.
We have a question.
Yep.
We have another question. What is a favorite memory of being able to interact with residents either on campus or off?
On campus or off? Well,
Question.
that is a good question. Probably one of my first best memories is an early one. While I was living here, bacheloring it here, I was challenged to go eat at all the houses. And that was some unique experiences. But when I walked into Maple House for the first time, there were a number of residents who had been there together, and it was amazing how they acted like a family. And one of the boys, I introduced myself, and he said, well, Mark was his name too. And I said, oh, do you spell it with a K or a C? That's a question that I ask people. And he goes, I spell it A-D-A-M. And I'm like, nice. I walked right into that one. So anyway, just watching that happen, I can remember I was at some of the different houses, and the teen mom at that time had a lot of toddlers, and it was kind of noisy. And then the Hickory house, which is an all-girls house, for whatever the reason, they seemed intimidated that night. Nobody said anything, so it was just really quiet. And then I get to Maple House, and I see this picture, and it was just like, in the back of my head, if I pictured Gateway, this is what I pictured: the family being extended to include these teenagers that have hurts in their life, and all that kind of stuff, and just watching them. I think those kids actually liked each other. Joe and Heather were there at that time, and Nathan and Rachel Mueller, and just watching them and the work that they did really touched my heart. So that's a favorite memory of mine. And some of those kids, they'll come back to church every once in a while now, even 8 years later. So
Wow. Yeah.
Glad for that.
We have another question.
Yep.
Someone else would like to know what's your favorite thing about working with your spouse?
Well, they keep us at opposite ends of the building. So probably the favorite thing so far, it's only been a couple of months, is when there's a required employee event, I no longer have to tell her she has to come as my spouse. She's already required to be here. So that is a good thing. But it really is a lift when I look out in the parking lot behind Gateway here and I see the van, and I even know she's in the building. I'm thankful for her opportunity to serve here and put her gifts to use as well.
Very good. All right. I think that's all I have. Is there anything else you want to share or thank people?
Really don't. I just appreciate, it's humbling to sit where I sit and watch the outpouring of love that comes in, whether at auction time, when every year I think, well, this is the year we take a step backwards and we take 3 steps forwards, or I see a church donation come in and I think of the people that have to be behind that, and the checks all the way from the $5 checks to the thousands of dollar checks, and just how God has blessed this church community and how they pass that blessing on to Gateway. It is pretty humbling when I sit back and I just think, wow, this is something, and we're called to be a giving people, and I see that every day. So I'm thankful for that.
Very good. Yeah, thanks for joining us. Next week, we're actually going on the road, down the road to Leo, and we're going to be interviewing Jason Huber, our local rep for Gateway Woods. So thanks again, and we'll see you next week.